Hey, it's Antrese, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter Podcast. One of the reasons I love making this podcast for you every other week is because I know what it's like to feel like you're not quite in the right place. I mean, people are nice and I love my friends, but I have a different connection with other artists. When artists get together, they light up. Normally shy or introverted people suddenly become animated and hard to shut up. That's how I know I found my tribe. You know what I mean, right? It's kind of like Helen said in an iTunes review. When I found this, she says, it made a world of difference. Now I feel in touch again with artists. I have my peeps and they're here. So yes, you most definitely are not alone, even if it feels that way in your studio. And now you can connect directly with me in a group of seriously dedicated artists in Growth Studio, my ongoing mentorship program. Growth Studio is a place for artists to hone their skills and discover who they are as an artist in a supportive community. It's a place where artists can get honest feedback from their peers, trade ideas, and ask the burning questions that pop up when we're trying to get to the next level with our art. You know, the questions you want to ask but feel silly because you mistakenly believe a real artist would already know these things. If Growth Studio sounds like it might be for you, head over to savvypainter.com/workshops to learn more. In the next couple of weeks, I'll be opening a few more spots to the Savvy Painter Growth Studio, and there are some special, really cool early bird bonuses, but you can only get those if you're already on the early bird list. This week on the Savvy Painter Podcast, I am delighted to introduce you to Bill Kocher. Bill is a landscape painter who likes to take it slow and truly discover a place. He's been painting his family farm for about 10 years. Well, he knows everything from where to be at what time to get just the perfect angle of light and precisely which birds nest in which trees. There is still plenty to understand and discover about his home. In this episode, we talk about getting to know a place intimately over a long period of time. Bill shares his painting techniques, color, and how he loves playing with the subtlety and nuances of midtones. We get into the question of whether we artists have to be just a little arrogant to do what we do, or if it's naivete. Or maybe we need to be just a tad delusional. I'm not sure. And I don't know that we found an answer. But he has such a beautiful answer to the question, why do we even need art? Bill paints from his home in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. You can see his work at williamkocher.com. Kocher is spelled Kocher, so that's williamkocher.com, and at Lancaster Galleries in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So without further ado, here is Bill Kocher. Bill, welcome to the Savvy Painter Podcast. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about how you got started. What were some of the artists that you looked at as a growing young artist that inspired you to take this to a professional level?
Yeah, I was one of those artists already in it. My father was an artist by trade. He studied at MICA in the 1950s and had a studio on the third floor of our house. So he worked as an illustrator. And when I was little, I would just sneak on up to his studio. And that's how it sort of all began for me.
Oh, wow. So you had the artist in-house.
That's right. It was a little bit of homeschooling, I suppose. But art was sort of part of our vocabulary as a family. So that I was lucky. I didn't really realize that till years later that was such a gift. Anyway, yeah, he would draw for us and really enthrall us at the kitchen table with what he was able to put down on paper. He was very good at catching a likeness. And as a kid, we would watch that and think it was something almost magical that he did. And all of those drawings and paintings he did, we still have, of course, and we love very much. So that was my beginning. That was where the seeds were planted. Having said that, he had a concern that he never expressed to me directly with words, but I think he was very anxious about me starting to draw a lot and wanting to consider going into art as a career. He had 6 kids and he knew what it would take to make a living. So even though he was doing it, kind of made him anxious, I think. I ended up going to school for something entirely different. I ended up getting a master's degree in psychology. But as soon as grad school was over, I packed up and started studying painting, which is something I really wanted to do as soon as I had fulfilled all my other requirements, I suppose.
What did he say to you did he sit you down and have a conversation and say, look, I know you love this, but.
He didn't put it in the negative. He would say, and I won't remember, but more along the lines of, wouldn't it be great to be a doctor? And I'd say, sure would. Let's go see that Monet show. It was kind of along those lines. And when I bought an old station wagon, and I told him that I wanted to buy the station wagon because I wanted to have room for art gear, he just rolled his eyes and sighed. But that was sort of cool too, and he didn't say anything to the negative, but he was also excited that I wanted to study in psychology as well. So.
Oh, that's so funny. I also bought 2 station wagons in my lifetime solely for the reason that it fits the painting gear and you can sleep in it.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. Oh, it's a great little camper. Yeah. We could do a whole story on that whole show.
I know. It's like, I've gotten to I love backpacking. And so I'm not afraid of pitching a tent and can do it almost anywhere. But I've suddenly realized that I can get up and out painting in the morning if I would just sleep in the car. So station wagons.
Right. You can really make that work as long as the heat's okay and, the animals aren't too large.
Well, if the animals are large, I'd rather be in the station wagon than a tent.
Yeah. No, right. Yeah. Not going to stop them. That's right. No, I feel the same way. That's funny.
So did you take off in your station wagon and do a painting trip? What happened?
I did. I moved. I did grad school in upstate New York in Rochester, and I moved to Cape Cod. And I picked the Cape because there were so many great artists painting there, not just painters, but artists of all stripes, singer-songwriters and poets and writers and, theater and drama. So there was a lot happening there, actually. This was back in the early 90s. And I ended up moving to the Cape and meeting people that I sought out, painters. And I didn't want to study with anybody. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want an assignment. I just went and had conversations with particular artists on the Cape that sort of luckily pointed me in the right direction as to what I should start doing. And that was fantastic.
Nice. So that's awesome that you kind of found your group of people and that it sounds like you picked the Cape specifically because you knew that it had an art culture already.
That's right. At that time, the Cape Cod School of Art was still up in Provincetown. I actually don't know what's happening with that at the moment, but I went up there and the director at that time was Lois Griffell. And I had a great time meeting with her and talking to her. She had just put out a book about landscape painting, and I thought that was great. And that's sort of where I began.
A lot of people ask about this when they're either moving to a new place or in a small town, how to either start an art community or find other artists. Do you have any insight on that you can share?
Well, I think it's easier to find one than it is to start one. I cannot describe how it happened, except that I just started meeting people who had friends, and we were all sort of ballpark same age range. And we would start getting together at the coffee shops and talk about art, and we would play some music and write some poetry and paint and draw. It was really great.
It sounds like it. It sounds like you hit the perfect spot of, just a community that was kind of ready to receive you and ready to embrace you.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it was lucky. And yet the Cape is known for that. I don't know if that's still occurring, but I assume it is. And it's just such a visually beautiful place to live. And once September hits and tourism dies down a bit, it really becomes your own. It's really a marvel.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you came out with your master's in psychology and you packed your bags and went to Cape Cod and started finding your group of people. Looking back on that, what were some of the things that you either actively did or accidentally did that you felt like really made an impact in your growth as an artist?
One of the people that I first met with there outside of Lois was a woman named Christy Valesig. She was the mother of a friend of mine, but she was also working as an artist at the Cape Cod Art Association. And I went and talked with her, and she said, a really good place to start is just by learning color and how to mix color and make color and see it. And it really was about her asking me to go out and start painting. It sounds simple, but that's exactly what I did. And I began to go out and start painting. It was a terrible mess, but I had a few hits and enough home runs that it kept my interest there. And it was a really meager and innocent beginning in a way. But looking back, I really loved it. I can remember the first night I literally went out in my backyard and painted outdoors for the first time. And I set an old white chair in the backyard and watched the sun go down and hit this white color and change into purples and pinks. And I was hooked. I just really loved it. I loved being outdoors, and I loved painting in such a raw way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good.
It's this feeling of just being in the painting in the sense that you're in the environment and responding to it, and it's not sitting still for you. Even if you are painting a landscape that's technically still, it's alive, it's moving, it's doing this thing with or without you.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Visual intensity.
Yeah.
Being in the moment.
Yeah. I don't know, the more I talk to people and the more that I experience my own growth as an artist, it's a form of meditation that when you are without it, it hurts, because it forces you to be really present and really focused and really in the moment in order to create that. And everything moves so fast now. You don't realize how.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Now, I think more than ever, we're desperate for that.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like we were saying, when you've been away and you've taken yourself out of your world and gone to paint for a while, returning to the everyday can be real startling. It can show you how far away you've been visually.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk a little bit about that sense, like how it is for you when you're able to get away and just go paint for an extended period of time?
Yeah, I've done that in a lot of different ways. I've done that with my friends, with groups of people, small groups, and I've done that on my own. And either way works. I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, I've enjoyed being away on my own very much. And I just set up out of doors usually and start making some paintings and taking in what's before me, Mm-hmm. It's really not more complicated than that. It's just starting to make, and I don't judge the work in that moment. I work on something and I work on fairly small panels, and I set those aside and keep going.
What size do you work at?
I've been stuck on 6x12s for a long time. I just sort of keep it at that to keep it simple. I haven't changed that up at all. And I used to sort of be all over the map with that, but now I just found a size that really works. And that's actually helpful to me as a process because I know where things are on the picture plane, how to say that. I sort of understand the scale there, and I don't have to think about that. That's one less thing to think about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I think that's also when you can find the thing that it's a known, but it doesn't become a crutch, then the ability to eliminate that decision from your whole painting experience helps you to stay open and receptive to whatever's happening.
That's well said. Yeah, that's it. It just gets it out of the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sometimes, like with colors too, I don't know how you feel about this, but there's, sometimes I hear conversations about whether or not it is cheating to use pre-mixed colors or whatever, there's a whole thing about like what's cheating in art and what's not, which to me, my personal opinion on that is that it's kind of silly.
Yeah. If I'm going to cheat, it's not going to be at that. I don't understand that quite. Well, I guess one of the wonderful things about making art and making paintings is the lawlessness and the fact that there are no rules. If you want something right out of the tube, do it.
Yeah.
At the end, the picture has to work. The rectangle has to work. So whatever you did to get there is, who cares?
Exactly.
Are we on the same page there?
We are exactly on the same page. And
two rule breakers. That's good.
there you go. And also, I kind of feel like just because it comes straight out of the tube does not mean that it's the perfect color, because it matters so much what you put around it. So it's like, I don't understand how the concept behind that.
No, that's exactly right. That's been well studied, hasn't it? But some of those really expensive colors you buy, why not use it right out of the tube? You paid so much for it.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm sort of partly teasing, but.
Well, no, it's true. I was explaining to my husband's, my brother-in-law, he's like asking about my paints and stuff. And he's visiting from Argentina. So it's a whole different frame of reference in terms of how much things cost. And so I'm like, yeah, well, like this one is $7, but this one is $60. And he's just like, what is in this?
Right. Right. Their eyes get big. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's just like, no wonder artists are starving.
Oh, yeah. But you have to have it too. You can't buy the cheap cerulean. You can't do it.
No. So speaking of which, what are the colors that I don't know if can't live without is the right way to ask it, but that you consistently use? And then what are some that are just kind of like your special treat?
I keep it limited. I consistently use 2 blues, the ultramarine and the cerulean, 2 reds. I use alizarin permanent and cadmium red medium, 2 yellows, and I use an Indian yellow, which is more toward an orange, and the lemon yellow or a cadmium yellow light. And then I use a white and a green. And that's it. I usually make my own gray, but sometimes I'll get lazy and buy like a Payne's gray or something to throw in there. I haven't really gone outside of that within the last 5 years, I'd say. I probably should. You've given me something to think about, but I really haven't deviated from that mix for a long time.
Yeah, that's pretty close to what I use consistently. And then every now and again, I throw something else in there just to shake things up a little bit.
Shake it up. Yeah, good. I'll have to try that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to
buy like a purple or something.
Yeah, like a Windsor purple or, something really kind of shocking to Windsor purple. And when you mix it with your greens, oh my God, that's just delicious.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay.
Yeah, it knocks it back just a little bit. And yeah.
Oh, it tames it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of tones it down a bit.
Yeah, and it gives it like kind of a coolness that's not predictable. Well, not predictable in the sense that it's going to be predictable to you. You'll figure it out. But when people are looking at it, they're kind of like, wow, okay, that works. But what did you do?
Oh, fantastic. And you can decide on whether you want to tell them or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just did. So
there you go.
How do you start your paintings?
Strong masses of color. I work from the middle out. In other words, I work in a middle range toward dark and also toward light. So I get depending on the color of the board I'm on, I should say, but I kind of start with that middle tone and work my way out. And I just start putting in some big masses of color. I want to do that part fast and move quickly and sort of impulsively and instinctively before I start slowing down.
Mm-hmm. I was taught to do knock the shadows in and then do the block in. And that just happens to be the way that I was taught. And I've learned to start from the middle, and I still haven't mastered it because while I'm completely fascinated with it and love the results, it's really hard for me not to knock in the shadows. Like, even though I'm like thinking, okay, this is the way I'm going to do it. And I'll get halfway in and then I'll be like, I don't know, shadow.
Right. I think for me that those darkest colors, the shadows, are not a place of interest for me. How to say that? I don't want to spend too much time on it. Maybe you're doing the same thing, but I want that sort of out of the way. I don't know. Sometimes the color inside a shadow can be so beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
But the people that I paint with who do start from darks and work to lights, I think that's great too. I've been working on panels that usually have a tone to them, or I put a tone on there that sort of gives me my jumping off point. Mm-hmm. I guess that's just what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. So. It makes sense, but I can see how what I've noticed, and it might just be the way that I'm doing it, is that when I knock in the shadows, I try to knock them out fast just so like I have that anchor because the light is changing so much. And then, an hour later, I don't want to change them, but you're seeing the color in the shadows and you kind of want to address that. And so it's kind of a dangerous thing to play with. If you leave it, it can end up being really dead. But if you play with it too much, then it can become like this.
It'll die too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like that middle range to start with too, jumping off what you said, because you can get such subtlety and nuance and not need to go to the extremes. You don't need to go all the way to that bright white or to that darkest blue, green, red. You can stay in the middle and really find some success there. Whereas if you've laid in your darkest dark fur, I could see myself having to get rid of that if it didn't meet what I needed in the middle of the painting. I don't know how to describe that.
I know what you mean, though. It's the opposite of putting in your highlight first. That's what I'm discovering.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Anyway, I could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is the danger of artists talking to artists, is you can just dive down this rabbit hole. Yes. You can dive down this rabbit hole and be like, okay, but exactly what do you do?
That's right. It's fantastic.
How do you choose your motifs? What do you look for when you go out to paint? What is it that really inspires you personally?
For the last 10 years, I've been painting on the family farm. And, it's a nice size spread where I can just be alone. And I know the place. And I know what crop of trees I want to go look at. I know where the highest elevation is to stand and get a vista and get a view. I know where the lows are, where I can go hide in a grove of hemlock or pines and start painting my way out of that. That's how I find my motif. It's actually, I'm relying fairly heavily on that, and I'm going to have to be careful of that. But truly, it is a place for me at this point. When I'm not there doing that, I can feel it, and it's uncomfortable. So I've got to be careful because I'm getting really locked in.
What's uncomfortable?
When I leave it, when I'm not there. It can be a similar type scene, but if it's not my spot, if it's not my home, I do not respond to it in the same way.
Uh-huh.
And I want to be home. I want to paint this place. And so that's where I've been, painting very steadily over the last 10 years, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me, though, because I was doing a lot of traveling and painting, and I spent 2 years traveling around and painting Argentina, and it was always so fast that I couldn't really get to know it in the way that you're talking about.
Oh, right.
And what I discovered on that trip was, okay, hands down, I love that trip. I'm not complaining at all. It was amazing, and I'm glad I did it, and sometimes I want to do it again. But I think there's also something to be said for becoming really intimate with a location and really taking the time to get to know it it's kind of the difference between fast food and a slow cooked meal.
Oh, yeah, that's well said. Quickly, I just wanted, is that where you did those glacial paintings or the paintings of the glaciers? Was that?
That's from that trip, yes.
Those are fantastic, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, those do not have the feel of something you just blew through. They look so well studied and well known,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I understand what you're saying. And it seems to me like I'm thinking of a couple people who've done something similar. And the obvious one is Morandi doing the same subject matter over and over and really discovering it and really getting to know it.
Right.
And I think that it goes back to what you said earlier about why you use your panels, or that those panels for you are one less thing that you have to think about.
Yeah, I think it is that same thing. I've been painting the last 10 days up at the farm, and, I know where certain birds live. Certain types of birds are going to sing at a certain time of night. And I like to have my easel near that. And I know where the sun is going to cast a certain shadow in June, and it's going to lay down on the field and really light that field up. And the sky is broadest at this corner of the property. And I'm able to be completely free there in a way that I can't just go get a motel room and go somewhere else and go paint that. It unsettles me a bit. And now I can do that and I can love that, but it's not the same thing for me at this time. I imagine that will change in life, but that's where I am right now. And I'm glad you understand that.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. And do you know the artist Peter Fiore? I talked to him on this podcast. I really appreciated how he said that he goes for these really long walks and just studies the light and studies what's happening. Like he'll go back to the same place different times of the day, different times of the year to really get a feel for what, for him in particular, it's the tree. But for you, it sounds like, your farm is your place and that you're having this really, really deep, intimate discovery and relationship with this place that you live. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it does feel that way. I hope that it's not limiting me, but it's what I'm getting the most out of right now. I'm not trying to be apologetic. I'm just saying that it's a bit of a love affair happening.
Very cool.
It's just home. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious if you could talk about maybe as you've gone through your growth as an artist, what are some of the things that you're challenged by?
I'm challenged to just paint better. I just want to improve. I just want to gain some sort of understanding as to why that Cezanne painting down in the Barnes collection jumps right off the canvas, why it sits there and moves. I would like for my painting to do that. I am challenged by other painters. I want so much out of my work, and that's where you can veer into taking it so seriously. I just desire that, and I really want to improve and get better.
Yeah. What are you most proud of?
I'm grateful that early in my life, I jumped ship and moved to Cape Cod and started learning something about painting. 25, 30 years later, and I still don't know much more than I did then, but I know something more. And I'm glad I did that. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I think it always makes me laugh when I hear painters, I think their work is fantastic, say things like that, but I totally, totally understand it because the more answers you get about your painting, the more questions you have. It's like at first your questions are so simple.
Yes.
And then they start getting deeper and deeper and you realize how much. I think it's like with life, the older you get, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything.
You don't. You're wonderfully naive at the beginning and you've got all that energy. And if you knew what you would have to go through, but on you go. And it is a wonder to me that every year I'm painting, I know less and less. It's just a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
At the same time, it is so wonderful.
It is. It's a love affair that we all have that we're all going through.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I think when you start out, you have this.
Aren't we lucky?
Oh, yeah. We are so lucky. I think so. I mean, I know.
Yeah, I do too.
People who listen to the show and artists in general, we get frustrated sometimes in our studio because we're impatient because things aren't moving as fast as we want them to. But when you take away what you want and you just enjoy and just be there for the process, it's the best life in the world.
It really is. There's no question about it. Even on its most difficult day and every bill you've got is overdue. And, you need new tires and everything else about it. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you said something about, I'm right there with you, Bill.
Good. We need each other.
We do. I think you said something earlier about just the naivete of when you start. And I think that sometimes on those bad days, I think, oh my God, if I knew what I was getting into, I'm not so sure I would have gotten into this. But I think there's also, I don't think we're that naive because we've all heard the stories. I think that we have a little bit of
yes, we were warned. Yes.
We were warned. Your dad warned you in his subtle way.
Yeah, you did. He crossed his arms. Yep.
He crossed his arms. But I think there's a little bit of, it's that word again, arrogance. So before we started recording, I said something along the lines of painting, so many paintings that have been done. And I said that I remember having this conversation with another artist who we were talking about the fact of, I don't remember what subject matter it was, and he said, it's been done so many times. And I said, well, it hasn't been done by me.
I think that's very well said. And I read something about this recently, and I couldn't remember where for the life of me, but you need some arrogance to get through this. You need some arrogance to be a painter and to be a maker of art, because it's part of your armor. The world we live in, and I'll speak for, perhaps our country, is that it's becoming less and less appreciative maybe of art and its need for art. And so we're going to have to be really thick-skinned and tough and explain why it's important and keep on. We need each other, and we need to have a little bit of arrogance to say, you know what, this is what I've got to say about something. It's so vital.
It is. I think part of that arrogance is a good partner to the naivete when you start off, that it's like everybody tells you how hard it is to be an artist. And I think, speaking for myself, I thought it's going to be tough, but I'm tough, so I can do this. You know, like there's a little bit of, maybe for other people, but I'm going to do it.
How you like me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
which we all say when we're 20 years old. Yes, life is tough, but not for me, because I'm smart and I'm going to do it differently.
No, you bet. You bet. That's right. Old Broadway. Here I come.
That's right. I'm on my way. Look out.
Yeah.
But it does serve us. Like, I think that's part of what, that drive, that I'm going to do this, resilience, whatever you want to call it, resilience, persistence, stubborn obstinance, naivete, complete delusional thinking.
Mm-hmm. And along the way, through all of those trials and tribulations and terrible paintings that we make, it changes and becomes something that you have to do. And you couldn't not do it. And then all the other stuff fades into the rearview mirror. It really does happen that way.
Yeah.
Luckily.
So I'd like you to answer your own question that you just posited. So this is going to be a tough one, Bill.
All right, here we go.
Why do we need art?
Well, I think we need art because it elevates life. It elevates the human condition. It's part of the cure. I do believe in it as a vital form of communication. It's just necessary for mankind, for humanity. And I'm sure every generation has said this, but especially now. I'm starting to sound like my grandparents, but that's true. We need it.
Mm-hmm.
I will mispronounce her name, but Katja Kollwitz, those drawings she did during World War II, think of that art she made. Just sensationally beautiful.
Yeah, I think that I'm starting to sound like my grandfather too, but
Okay.
But he was a smart man.
Yeah.
No, I think that now it's
a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. I'm just thinking of like, there's so few poets, and poetry is kind of getting lost, I feel like.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Can you imagine having to make it as a poet? You're absolutely right. I just finished a book, Mary Oliver. The title was The Truro Bear, Truro. It's a place, the Truro Bear and Other Adventures. And there's just so much in there. It's just so fantastic. And it's probably not as known as it needs to be. What do we need to do?
Yeah, and I worry that I think among painters, we're completely willing to slow down and really pay attention. I think it's just because I saw something on social media the other day, and I'm seeing more and more of this service that you can, basically send your Instagram photos and they'll send you back these cubes or these squares that you can put on your wall. And then there's another one where they, same thing, you just tag a couple of your photos and they'll send them back to you as framed prints. And it kind of made me think like, awesome in a way, but in another way, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's just like, nobody's going to take the time to appreciate. It's the artistic version of the selfie in a way that nobody's going to take the time to really appreciate what other people are creating. And again, that fast food versus a slow cooked meal thing where it just feels like.
That's exactly right.
Everything's so fast and disposable.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. There's a place for all those things that may or may not fall into the shallow end. And then there's things that need more depth to it and more meaning. And, a diet of all the shallow stuff, it's just not going to satisfy a lot of people. Or maybe it will, I don't know. But it satisfies some of us. And we've just got to keep singing our song. It doesn't matter anyway. We can't not do it. But, we just have to keep plugging along and doing exactly what you're doing, which is giving it a voice. And, on we go.
Yeah. It's a tough one, though.
It is tough. It's part of the challenge of our modern day times. It's just not like anything we've ever experienced before. I can take a picture of a painting with my cell phone and have it online, and the whole experience can be in less than 24 hours. That just is amazing to me.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to be amazed by it, yeah.
Well, since we're both starting to sound like our grandparents, I don't know.
I know, this is really getting rocking chair stuff here. In fact, I'm late for my nap. If you could kind of speed things up, that'd be great.
Yeah, it is getting kind of late. Yeah, but my husband teases me because I'm ready for dinner at 6:00, and he's like, "Really? You're turning it are we going to start eating dinner at 4:30 now?" Like maybe.
Lights out at 8. Yeah, that's the future.
So, speaking of painting for painting's sake, what is your dream project if there were no restrictions or on time or money? What would you create?
Well, it wouldn't be anything, it would not be murals. I just would like to take a year off and go paint my home, this property I spoke of, and that would make me happy. So it wouldn't be anything astronomical. It just would like the time to be able to do that. See what happens, I just want to get better and, make something that equals how I feel about it.
Do you have a painting that you've done on your property that you would never sell or give away?
Yeah, I have a few of those. They just are little intimate paintings that I've done that they are close to my soul, so I don't want to part with them. It's not necessarily that they're incredible paintings, but they're just, they were a moment in time or, something that was close to my heart. So they just need to stay with me.
You mentioned that you just finished reading the Mary Oliver book. I'm curious if you have any books that you think are sort of a must read for other artists, or this is your chance to get on your soapbox and say, this is what I think people should know.
Oh, okay. Well, I am going through a book for the second time and still trying to grapple with it. It's called Search for the Real. It's a collection of essays by Hans Hofmann. It's just great. I believe I wrote it in the 40s. And I don't know if it was before or after he began teaching in Provincetown, but he's got a lot to say as a teacher about painting. It's kind of one of those books you pick up and read a little bit and try to grasp it and then pick up and read more later. It's not a novel you blow through.
Right.
What he says in a paragraph, you have to really sit down and think, at least I have to really sit down and think about. I don't get it the first take. I have to really think about what he's talking about. So I've loved that book. Yeah. And I took it with me these last couple of weeks.
What are some of your biggest takeaways from that book? What are some of the things that stuck with you?
Just about how color can shift the energy and dynamic of the painting. I just love that. I love taking that out and trying it in the big laboratory, the garden, trying it. Take a big mass of red and try to make it work,
So it sounds like one of those books that you read a couple paragraphs in the morning and then go paint and then come back and read another 2 paragraphs.
Well, I think it's more a book for the evening, actually. It's more of a later evening, deeper dimension type conversation. For me, I think if I read it in the morning, I would just cry and never go paint. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's for later. Yeah. I'm going to try that tomorrow.
I'm going to sleep
It's a little
on that.
cloudy. I think I'd better sit it out. Yeah. It's been a great book. But having said that, I'm not trying to paint myself as somebody who understands it very well, but I have enjoyed what he has to say about painting. And he is the quintessential teacher. Good essays.
I'm going to look that book up. I need something to chew on.
All right. This will help.
For all the artists who are listening right now, I know there's a lot of people who are kind of at the, not beginner, but more like medium and intermediate stage, like kind of like in that in-between zone. What advice do you have for people like that who are at that point where they're like, okay, I've been bitten by this bug. I know that there's no other life. How can I make this easier on myself?
Right. My advice would be twofold. One is to do something that is out of your comfort level. Get out of that comfort level somehow. And the second part would be to do something that is consistent and meaningful, that answers what speaks to you or what speaks to why you're doing it. If there's something driving you to paint, if you're one of those people who's just trying to make something really beautiful, stick with that and make that painting as beautiful as you can, is what an old friend of mine used to say. Just make it as beautiful as you can. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you.
Sure.
And then I'll let you go.
Okay.
You can go take your nap. You said for the last 10 years you have been really focused on your farm. I'm asking you this question because I get similar questions from people. Questions like, I just want to paint my backyard. Is that enough? Or all I care about is, it's just the light. That's all I care about. There's nothing else deep, meaningful, whatever. And I feel like I should have some philosophical, deep meaning, purpose to what I paint. Yet what I'm fascinated by is very, very simple. And so I think the underlying question from all these people is, can it be that simple? And is this enough?
It can be, and it is. I think your example of Morandi was the best. And I think that some of the most visually present and fluid paintings were simple in subject matter and in content. And how about those Whistler nocturnes? It doesn't have to be the entire orchestra. It can be a foggy night in London on the pier, and it turns into something that just takes our breath away. So for me, it can be something very simple as your backyard, or the way the light plays on the fence as your rose bush, or whatever it might be, that can answer your call and just have at it. Just make it beautiful.
Well said.
Thank you. Boy, you're tough.
Yeah, I ask you the question. Yeah, the deep questions. What does art mean? And
yeah. What's the meaning of life? Yeah, good.
Like, thanks for that one, Antries.
Yeah, super cool. No, it's fantastic. I hope that our paths cross someday, if you're ever on the East Coast.
I feel like I need to come out. I have this like itch to go travel, not for painting purposes, but like I feel like a friend of mine, I'm stealing his idea. My friend Tom Breeden just went on a museum tour, and I'm kind of feeling like I need to go on a museum/art tour. So he basically just...
Can you imagine?
It's possible.
If that's what you want to do, make it happen. Look what you've done. Oh my gosh, with this podcast, it's fantastic. We're all lucky to have you.
Thank you. Well, Bill, thank you very, very much for sharing your story, sharing your insights, your advice. I really appreciate you.
Well, you're most welcome, and it was a true pleasure talking with you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Savvy Painter podcast with Bill Kocher. Go to savvypainter.com and click on the podcast tab. You'll find show notes there where you can see examples of Bill's work, get links to all of the other artists that we talked about, and connect with him. That's at savvypainter.com/podcast. Artists from around the world listen to the Savvy Painter podcast, and the number one thing I've been hearing over and over again for the past few years is that they feel isolated. They don't have a community to reach out to. There's no one to ask when they get stuck on a painting. No easy access to other artists who know what it's like and can give advice on the nitty-gritty stuff, like which medium works best for a particular technique. Things like that. My husband is incredibly supportive, but he's not an artist, and as much as he'd love to help, he wouldn't know those details. And I'll say that my friends are the best. They are there to support me in any way and every way they can. But most of them aren't artists either, so there's only so much that they can say. I kept hearing that same frustration over and over again, and for a long time I didn't do anything about it. But now I finally decided to do something about it. That's why I created Growth Studio. I launched it first to some of my most ambitious students, and then a few months ago, I opened it up to just a few more. The main thing that I wanted to do was to help aspiring painters become better at their craft and create a community where they can connect with other artists who are going through the exact same highs and lows in their studio. And what's happened since then is pretty cool. Growth Studio members are saying things like, I know I was hesitant at first, but everybody is so supportive. Hearing feedback from all these different artists is amazing. I'm so glad I decided to join. Or this one, I never understood the concept of notans and all the different ways that I can use them. I didn't think they were that helpful, but now I finally get it and can't start a painting without them. And another person said, I just love having a group that gets me. And in just a few weeks, I am opening up the Savvy Painter Growth Studio one more time. Go to savvypainter.com/workshops to sign up for the early bird list and to learn more about the program.